My daughter texted me not to come to her wedding because my poverty would ruin their ceremony. 2 days earlier, I'd won $33 million, but kept it secret, planning to surprise them with a beach house and business. Now, I was sitting in my rusty Honda with a box containing receipts for everything I'd canceled. The irony was almost beautiful. They'd rejected their own jackpot. Comment your city below and subscribe. Ready for an amazing story? Let's begin. 3 months before that text message, I was doing what I'd been doing every Tuesday for 15 years, buying groceries with coupons and hoping my debit card wouldn't get declined. Being a 57-year-old widow in Milwaukee isn't exactly glamorous, especially when your late husband's medical bills ate through everything you'd saved for retirement. But let me back up to where this really started. My daughter Emma had been engaged to Marcus for 8 months, and from day one, he treated me like I was contagious. The first time I met him, he actually asked Emma if I'd be able to dress appropriately for their circle of friends. I should have known then what I was dealing with. Marcus came from what he called old money, which apparently meant his grandfather had owned a successful plumbing business and left the family a modest trust fund. Nothing spectacular, but enough to make him think he was descended from the Rockefellers. Emma, bless her heart, had convinced herself that marrying him would solve all her financial problems. The wedding planning had been 6 months of pure torture. Every conversation somehow circled back to money. Or rather, my lack of it. "Mom, Marcus thinks maybe you shouldn't sit at the main table since his family is paying for most of the reception. Mom, could you maybe borrow something nice to wear? Marcus's aunt is very particular about appearances. Mom, we've decided to keep the guest list intimate, so maybe you could just invite one person instead of 3. Each request felt like a little paper cut, but I kept telling myself it was Emma's special day and I'd do whatever made her happy, even when Marcus started calling me the charity case at family dinners, always with a laugh, as if it was just harmless teasing. The lottery ticket was purely impulse. I'd been having the worst week. My landlord had raised the rent, my car needed new tires I couldn't afford, and Emma had called to tell me Marcus thought it would be better if I didn't give a speech at the reception. I was standing in line at the gas station feeling sorry for myself when I saw the Powerball sign. $33, exactly what I had left in my wallet after groceries. I picked numbers that meant something. Emma's birthday, my anniversary with Robert, the date he died, and one random number because I needed 6 total. The odds were ridiculous, but for that moment, buying hope felt better than buying another cup of ramen noodles. Saturday night came and went. I forgot about the ticket completely until Tuesday morning when I was searching for my grocery list and found it crumpled in my purse. The numbers on my phone screen didn't make sense at first. I checked them 3 times, then 4, then called the lottery hotline with shaking hands. $33 million. After taxes, still more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. My first thought wasn't about cars or houses or vacations. It was about Emma. I could give her the wedding of her dreams, set her and Marcus up for life, maybe even buy them that little beach house she'd always talked about. I spent the entire week researching properties, looking at businesses for sale, planning the perfect surprise. This would show Marcus exactly what kind of family he was marrying into. The plan was simple. After the ceremony, I'd hand them an envelope with the deed to a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Cape Cod, and the paperwork for a thriving local bakery that threw off enough profit to support them comfortably. They could live their dream life by the ocean, and Marcus would finally understand that his wife's mother wasn't the burden he'd painted her to be. I was driving to the church, practicing my little speech about new beginnings and family, when my phone buzzed with Emma's message. I pulled over to read it, certain it was last-minute details about parking or timing. Instead, it was 17 words that changed everything. "Don't come. Marcus doesn't want your poverty ruining our ceremony. We'll send pictures later." I sat there for 10 minutes, reading and rereading those words. Then I started laughing. Not happy laughter, the kind that comes when life becomes so absurd that crying would be insufficient. I turned the car around and drove straight to the real estate office. "I need to cancel this purchase immediately," I told the agent. "And I need copies of every document showing what the buyers just lost." By evening, I had a cardboard box filled with property deeds, business contracts, and financial statements. 38,000 square feet of oceanfront property, a business generating $300,000 annually in profit, and investment accounts that would have set them up for generations. All canceled, all retrieved, all gone. I left the box on Emma's doorstep with a simple note. Here's what you rejected today. Mom. 2 hours later, my phone started ringing. My phone was ringing so continuously I had to turn off the volume. Text after text flooded in, each one more desperate than the last. Emma, Marcus, even his snooty mother Patricia were suddenly very interested in having a conversation. The first voicemail was Emma crying, "Mom, there has to be some mistake. Call me back immediately, please." The second was Marcus, trying to sound reasonable. "Mrs. Morrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we sit down and discuss this like adults?" The third was Patricia, with her usual condescending tone. "Claire, dear, I'm sure Emma didn't mean what she said. Young brides get overwhelmed. Let's not be hasty about anything important." I deleted every single one without listening to the complete messages. Amazing how quickly poverty became misunderstanding and Claire, dear, when $33 million entered the picture. My neighbors started noticing the parade of cars driving slowly past my apartment building. Emma's red Honda, Marcus's pretentious BMW, even Patricia's massive SUV, all taking turns like they were casing the place. Mrs. Patterson from 3B knocked on my door Wednesday evening with genuine concern. "Claire, honey, is everything all right? There's been people sitting in cars outside all day. Should I call the police?" "No need, Mrs. Patterson. Just some family members who suddenly remembered I exist." The breakthrough attempt came Thursday morning. I was having my coffee and watching the news when someone started banging on my door like the building was on fire. Through the peephole, I could see Emma and Marcus standing in the hallway. Emma's wedding makeup was smeared. Her hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it, and Marcus had lost his usual polished appearance. "Mom, please, I know you're in there." Emma's voice was hoarse from crying. "We need to talk." I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Talk about what? I thought my poverty would ruin things." Marcus stepped forward, trying his most charming smile. "Mrs. Morrison, Claire, that text was a complete miscommunication. Emma was stressed about the seating arrangements and—" "The seating arrangements?" I cut him off. "Is that what we're calling it now? Because the message seemed pretty clear to me." Emma pushed past Marcus. "Mom, you don't understand. Marcus's family had all these opinions about who should be at the head table. And his mother was making comments, and I just panicked. I was trying to protect you from their judgment. By disinviting me from your wedding. By suggesting you might be more comfortable at the later reception instead of the ceremony." Marcus interjected smoothly. It was poor word choice in a text message. I almost admired how quickly he'd constructed this alternative narrative. If I hadn't seen those property documents, hadn't watched their faces when they realized what they'd lost, I might have actually believed them. "That's interesting," I said, pulling out my phone, "because I have the message right here. Don't come. Marcus doesn't want your poverty ruining our ceremony. Which part of that suggests I'm invited to any reception?" Emma's face crumpled. "Mom, please, I was wrong, I was horrible, but we're family. Families forgive each other." "Family," I repeated the word slowly. "Tell me, Emma, when exactly did I become family again? Was it when you saw those property deeds? Or when you realized the business valuation?" Marcus's composure finally cracked. "Composure. Look, we all know you couldn't have afforded those properties on your salary. Where did you get that kind of money? Because if you borrowed it or got involved with something illegal—" "Illegal?" I laughed. "Marcus, I won the lottery. Completely legal, completely legitimate, and completely none of your business anymore." The hallway went silent. Emma stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You won the lottery?" she whispered. $33 million, I confirmed. "I was going to surprise you both, make all your dreams come true, set you up for life." I looked directly at Marcus. "But then I learned exactly what you thought of me and my poverty." Marcus's brain was clearly working overtime. "Mrs. Morrison, if this is true, then obviously the wedding is back on. We can work this out. Family is family, and what? Now that I have money, my presence won't ruin your ceremony? How convenient." Emma reached for my hands. "Mom, I love you no matter what. The money doesn't matter. Then you won't mind that I've donated it all to charity," I said calmly. The color drained from both their faces. "You— what?" Marcus stammered. "I'm kidding, but your reactions tell me everything I need to know about why you're both standing in my hallway." I started to close the door, but Emma stuck her foot in the gap. "Mom, wait. What do you want from us? What would it take to fix this?" What did I want? An apology? An explanation? For them to somehow prove that they loved me for me and not my bank account? The problem was, we were past that point. They'd shown me exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless. "I want you to be happy," I said finally. "Both of you, but I want you to be happy without my money." As I closed the door, I heard Marcus say to Emma, "Don't worry, she'll come around. People don't walk away from family over hurt feelings." He was right about one thing. People don't walk away from family over hurt feelings. They walk away when they realize they were never really family to begin with. The funeral for my relationship with Emma happened quietly over the next 3 weeks. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it was a series of small revelations that made me understand how deep the damage really went. The first funeral flower was Emma's best friend Sarah calling me. "Mrs. Morrison, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but Emma asked me to talk to you. She's been crying for days, and honestly, she's making herself sick." I'd known Sarah since she was 12 years old. She'd eaten dinner at my table hundreds of times, called me second mom, and had always been genuine and kind. "Sarah, I appreciate you caring about Emma, but this isn't something that can be fixed with a conversation." "I know about the lottery," she said quietly. "Emma told me everything. But Mrs. Morrison, I also know things Emma hasn't told you." That got my attention. "What kind of things?" "Marcus has been different since they got engaged. He's been pushing Emma to distance herself from people he considers beneath their social level. He made her drop some of her oldest friends because their jobs weren't impressive enough. He even suggested she should limit contact with you because his family thought it looked bad." My stomach dropped. Emma went along with this? She's been trying so hard to fit into his world. Marcus convinced her that his family's approval was essential for their future, and that meant presenting the right image. The wedding thing. I think that was the final test. He wanted to see if she'd choose his family's comfort over yours. And she did. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Morrison, Emma loves you, but she's also terrified of losing Marcus. He's made her believe that she's lucky he chose her, that she needs to prove she deserves him. It's like watching someone disappear into someone else's life." After hanging up with Sarah, I sat with that information for hours. Was Emma a victim of Marcus's manipulation, or had she simply revealed who she really was when forced to choose? Maybe both could be true. The second funeral flower was a conversation with my sister Janet, who'd heard about the wedding drama through Emma. "Claire, honey, I've been worried about you. Emma called me crying about some misunderstanding, but she wasn't making much sense." Janet was 3 years older and had always played the protective big sister role. She'd also never particularly liked Marcus, though she'd kept her opinions to herself. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Jan. Emma told me not to come to her wedding because my poverty would ruin it. Then she found out about the lottery money and suddenly wanted to reconcile." "Wait, back up. What lottery money?" I explained the whole story. Janet listened without interrupting, which wasn't her usual style. $33 million, she repeated when I finished. "And Emma didn't know?" I wanted it to be a surprise. I was going to give them a house and a business. And now? Now I know exactly what they think of me. Janet was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke. "Claire, I need to tell you something. Last Christmas, when you went to the bathroom during dinner, Marcus made a joke about you. He said something about how it was convenient that you didn't have any money to leave to anyone because it saved Emma the guilt of having to take care of you when you got older." Each word hit like a physical blow. Emma heard this? Emma laughed. The third funeral flower was my own investigation into Marcus's background. If I was going to be accused of being a gold digger's mother, I figured I should know more about the gold. It took one afternoon at the library and some basic internet research to learn that Marcus Patterson's family wealth was modest at best. His grandfather's plumbing business had been successful, but hardly the empire Marcus implied. The family trust fund he'd mentioned was worth maybe $200,000, split between 6 cousins. His current job at a mid-level accounting firm paid well, but wasn't the prestigious position he'd led Emma to believe. Most interesting was what I found about his previous relationships. 3 broken engagements, all ending when the women apparently couldn't handle the commitment. One ex-fiancé, according to a mutual friend's Facebook post, had described Marcus as charming until you become inconvenient to his image. I was looking at a pattern of behavior that had nothing to do with me personally and everything to do with how Marcus controlled people by making them feel inadequate. The 4th funeral flower was Emma herself, showing up at my door 3 weeks after the wedding would have happened. "Mom," she said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. My motherly instincts kicked in immediately. "Come in. Have you been eating?" "I can't think about food." She collapsed onto my couch like her bones had turned to liquid. "Mom, I think I made the biggest mistake of my life. The wedding? Everything." She started crying again. "Marcus and I had a huge fight after you wouldn't take our calls. He said if I couldn't control my own mother, how could he trust me to handle other family situations? Then he started questioning whether I was really ready for marriage, if I was going to let hurt feelings interfere with our future." I sat down beside her. "What did you tell him?" "I defended you. I told him that text message was cruel and that I was ashamed of sending it. You know what he said?" I waited. "He said I was choosing a bitter old woman over my own happiness." That's when I realized this isn't about the lottery money or the wedding. This is about the fact that the man I was going to marry thinks my mother is a bitter old woman, and I was okay with that as long as it made my life easier. Emma looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Mom, I am so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know that I know what I did. I chose his approval over your dignity. I chose his family's comfort over your feelings. I chose wrong. And Marcus? I ended it yesterday. Gave him back the ring. His mother called me an ungrateful little gold digger, which was ironic since they were the ones trying to get their hands on your money once they found out about it." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Emma spoke again. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in a way that can't be undone. But Mom, I need you to know that losing you would be worse than losing him ever could be." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was 28 years old, heartbroken, and finally seeing clearly after months of living in someone else's version of who she should be. "Emma, what do you think I should do with the lottery money?" She seemed surprised by the question. "I don't know. Whatever makes you happy, I guess. Even if I gave it all away? Even then. Even if I spent it all on myself? Even then. Even if I used it to travel the world and you never saw me again? I'd be heartbroken. But, even then, for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Then we can start over. But starting over, I was learning, doesn't mean going back to the way things were. Starting over at 57 with $33 million turns out to be more complicated than you'd think. Not the money part. That was surprisingly straightforward once I hired a good financial advisor. The complicated part was figuring out who I was when I wasn't just Emma's struggling mother or Robert's widow. I decided to start with my living situation. The cramped apartment where I'd been counting every penny for 3 years suddenly felt like a costume I could finally take off. But I didn't want something flashy that would draw attention or make me a target. I wanted a home that felt like me, whoever that turned out to be. I found a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from my old apartment. Nothing fancy, but it had a beautiful kitchen with natural light, a small garden where I could grow vegetables, and enough space for Emma to visit without us being on top of each other. The realtor kept showing me larger, more expensive properties, but this one felt right. "Are you sure?" Barbara, my realtor, asked for the 3rd time. "With your budget, you could afford something much more impressive." "I don't want impressive," I told her. "I want comfortable." Moving was cathartic in ways I hadn't expected. As I packed up 3 years' worth of financial stress and worry, I found myself throwing away more than I kept. Old bills I'd saved in case of disputes, coupons for things I never bought, clearance items I'd purchased because they were cheap, not because I needed them. The physical act of clearing out felt like clearing out emotionally, too. Emma helped with the move, and it was the first time we'd spent extended time together since our reconciliation. She was different, quieter, more thoughtful, less eager to please. Breaking up with Marcus had changed her in ways that went beyond just ending a relationship. "Mom," she said while we were unpacking my kitchen, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. What was Dad like when you first met him? I stopped wrapping dishes and looked at her. Why do you ask? I've been thinking about relationships a lot lately. About how I choose men, about what I think I deserve. She sat down on a moving box. I realized I don't really remember you and Dad together. I was so young when he died, and after that, you were just surviving. Robert, I hadn't talked about him in any depth for years. After he died, it had been easier to focus on practical things than emotional ones. Your dad was kind, I said finally. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Not charming like Marcus, but genuinely kind. He noticed when people were struggling, and he helped without making a big show of it. Were you happy with him? Very. But Emma, happiness in a relationship isn't about finding someone who makes you feel special because you're better than everyone else. It's about finding someone who makes you feel valued for who you actually are. She nodded slowly. Marcus made me feel special, but only when I was performing the version of myself he wanted. And how did that feel? Exhausting. Like I was always auditioning for a part in my own life. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma spoke again. Mom, what are you going to do now? I mean, with your life. You don't have to work. You could travel. You could do anything. It was a question I'd been asking myself for weeks. What do you do when all the external pressures that have shaped your choices suddenly disappear? When survival isn't the primary concern anymore? I think I want to learn things, I said. I never finished college because I got married so young. Maybe I'll take some classes. Like what? Art? Maybe. Languages? Cooking classes just for fun. Not because I need to make cheap meals stretch. I laughed. I might even take a creative writing course. I think I might have some stories to tell. That sounds amazing, Mom. The first month in the new house was a revelation. I could afford organic vegetables. I could keep the heat at a comfortable temperature. I could buy books new instead of waiting for the library sale. Small luxuries, but they added up to a completely different experience of daily life. I also discovered that having money changes how people treat you, even when they don't know you have money. The confidence that comes from financial security is apparently visible in ways I hadn't realized. Salespeople were more attentive. Service providers were more respectful. Even strangers on the street seemed to make more eye contact. It's not really about the money, I told Janet during one of our weekly phone calls. It's about not being afraid anymore. Afraid of what? Everything. Afraid my card would be declined. Afraid of unexpected expenses. Afraid of being a burden on Emma. Afraid of getting old without resources. Fear was driving every decision I made. And now? Now I can think about what I actually want instead of what I can afford or what other people need from me. But not everyone was happy about my transformation. I learned this when I ran into Marcus at the grocery store about 6 weeks after the move. He was alone, which surprised me since I'd assumed he'd immediately moved on to another relationship. Claire, he said with his practiced smile, though it looked more forced than usual, you look different. I was dressed better. Not expensively, but better fitted clothes and colors that looked good on me instead of whatever was cheapest. I'd gotten my hair professionally cut and styled. I was wearing makeup for the first time in months, not because I had anywhere special to go, but because it made me feel good. I feel different, I said honestly. Emma mentioned you'd come into some money. Emma mentioned a lot of things, I'm sure. His smile faltered. Look, Claire, I hope there are no hard feelings about the wedding situation. Sometimes couples go through difficult patches during the planning process. Is that what we're calling it? Emma was under a lot of pressure. My family can be demanding. She was trying to balance everyone's needs, and things got miscommunicated. I marveled at his ability to rewrite history. In his version, apparently, no one had done anything wrong. It was all just a series of miscommunications and external pressures. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. What did you think was going to happen? After the wedding, I mean. Did you think I would just disappear? Accept being excluded from family gatherings? Pretend to be okay with being treated like an embarrassment? I think you're being overly sensitive about some jokes and misunderstandings. And I think you're a controlling manipulator who tried to isolate my daughter from people who really love her. His mask slipped completely. Your daughter was lucky I was willing to overlook her background. Most men in my position would have expectations about family connections and social standing that she couldn't meet. You're right, I agreed. Most decent men would never consider treating someone's family as an embarrassment to be hidden. I walked away before he could respond. But I heard him call after me. She'll never find anyone who can offer her what I could. Maybe not, I thought. But she'll find someone who doesn't think offering her anything gives him the right to demean her family. That night, Emma called. "Mom, I heard you ran into Marcus today." "How did you hear that?" "He called me. Said you were hostile and unreasonable and that he was concerned about your mental state." I laughed. "My mental state is excellent, clear in fact. Good, because I need to tell you something. Marcus has been calling me regularly, trying to reconcile. He says he's learned from his mistakes and that we could start fresh." My heart sank. And I keep thinking about something you said, about how happiness isn't about feeling special because you're better than everyone else. Marcus made me feel like I was better than other people, but he also made me feel like I wasn't good enough for him. How twisted is that? Very twisted. I don't want that anymore. I want what you and Dad had. I want someone who values me for who I am, not for who I can become if I change everything about myself. That's all I've ever wanted for you. I know. And Mom, I'm proud of you. For the money thing, yes, but mostly for not letting what he did to us define how you see yourself. You could have let this make you bitter, but instead you're becoming more yourself than I've ever seen you. After we hung up, I sat in my new living room in my comfortable house, thinking about identity and transformation and second chances. 6 months ago, I'd been a broke widow whose own daughter was ashamed of her. Now I was a woman with choices, with possibilities, with the financial freedom to discover who I'd always been underneath the survival mode. But the biggest surprise was still coming. The biggest surprise came disguised as a regular Tuesday morning, 3 months after I'd moved into the house. I was drinking coffee in my sunny kitchen and reading the newspaper, an actual physical newspaper. Another small luxury I'd rediscovered when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a well-dressed woman about my age holding a clipboard. I almost didn't answer, assuming she was selling something, but something about her posture seemed more official than commercial. "Mrs. Morrison? My name is Linda Chen, and I'm an investigator with the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. I wonder if I could speak with you for a few minutes." My blood turned to ice water. Had I made some mistake with the lottery taxes? Was there some problem with my winnings that would take everything away? "Is there something wrong with my tax payments?" I asked, inviting her inside. "Oh no, nothing like that. Your lottery claim was processed perfectly. I'm actually here about something else entirely." She settled into my living room chair and consulted her clipboard. "We've been investigating some irregularities in lottery ticket sales in the Milwaukee area, and your name came up as someone who might be able to help us." "I don't understand." "Mrs. Morrison, where did you purchase your winning ticket?" "The BP station on Fletcher Avenue, the one near the library." She made a note. "And what time of day was that?" "Early afternoon, maybe 1 o'clock. I just finished grocery shopping." "Do you remember anything unusual about the transaction?" "The clerk? Other customers? Anything out of the ordinary?" I thought back to that Tuesday. No, it was very routine. The clerk was a young man, maybe early 20s. He seemed normal. There was one other customer behind me, an older gentleman, but I didn't pay much attention. Linda leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you something that might sound strange. After you purchased your ticket, did you have any contact with anyone from the store? Phone calls, visits, anything like that?" "No, nothing. I didn't even remember I had the ticket until several days later." "What about after you discovered you'd won? Any unusual contact from anyone?" "Just the normal lottery officials and my financial advisor, and my family once they found out." I paused. "Why are you asking these questions?" Linda set down her clipboard and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Morrison, we have reason to believe there was an organized scheme involving certain lottery retailers in your area. Clerks were being paid to identify customers who purchased tickets with high potential payouts, then contact associates who would approach the winners with various investment schemes or charitable causes." "You mean they were targeting lottery winners?" "Exactly. The idea was to convince recent winners to invest large portions of their winnings in fake businesses or donate to fake charities before they had time to get proper financial advice." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And you think the store where I bought my ticket was involved?" "We know it was involved. What we're trying to figure out is why you weren't contacted. According to our investigation, every other big winner who purchased tickets from that location over the past 2 years was approached within 48 hours of claiming their prize. I stared at her. Every other winner was scammed, or they attempted to scam them. Most people lost at least some money before they realized what was happening. A few people lost substantial amounts. But you, Mrs. Morrison, seemed to be the only recent big winner from that location who was left completely alone. I don't understand why that would be. Linda consulted her notes again. The scheme worked like this. The clerk would make a copy of potentially winning tickets before selling them. If a ticket won, they had the buyer's information from any credit card transaction or security footage. They'd pass that information to their associates, who would research the winner and approach them with a convincing story. But my ticket was purchased with cash. Exactly. And that may be what saved you. Without a credit card transaction, they would have had to rely on security footage to identify you. But here's the interesting part. According to our technical analysis, the security camera system at that location was mysteriously offline for about 4 hours that day, including when you made your purchase. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. So the system that would have been used to target me happened to be broken when I bought the ticket. It wasn't broken. It was deliberately disabled. Someone with access to the system turned it off from about 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. that Tuesday. Who would have had access? That's what we're trying to figure out. The store manager claims he doesn't know anything about it. The clerk who was working that day, his name is David Patel, also claims ignorance. But Mrs. Morrison, someone protected you that day, and we'd like to know who. I thought about that Tuesday, trying to remember any details that might be significant. The other customer, I said suddenly. The older gentleman behind me in line. What about him? He seemed observant. He was looking around the store a lot, and I remember thinking it was odd because most people just focus on their transaction and leave. Linda made another note. Can you describe him? 60s, maybe early 70s. Well-dressed but not flashy. Gray hair, very neat. He had kind eyes. I remember that specifically because he smiled at me when I was having trouble finding my cash. Did he say anything to you? Just, good luck with those numbers when I was leaving. But he said it like he meant it, not just casual politeness. Linda was writing rapidly now. Mrs. Morrison, this might sound like a strange question, but do you have any idea why someone might want to protect you specifically? Any connection to law enforcement, journalism, anything that might make you a risky target for this kind of scheme? I'm a widow who worked part-time at the library. Before this lottery win, I was barely getting by financially. I can't imagine why anyone would see me as particularly dangerous to a scam operation. Linda closed her notebook and stood up. Mrs. Morrison, thank you for your time. If you think of anything else about that day, or if anyone approaches you with unusual investment opportunities or requests for charitable donations, please call me immediately. She handed me her business card and headed for the door, then turned back. Mrs. Morrison, I've been investigating financial crimes for 15 years, and I can tell you that you're very lucky. The people we're tracking have stolen millions of dollars from lottery winners. Someone went out of their way to make sure you weren't on their list. After she left, I sat in my kitchen thinking about anonymous protection and random kindness. Somewhere out there was a person who had prevented me from being victimized, and I had no way to thank them. But the story got even stranger 2 days later, when Linda Chen called with an update. Mrs. Morrison, we found something interesting. The clerk who was working when you bought your ticket, David Patel, he's been cooperating with our investigation, and he told us something that might interest you. What's that? He said the older gentleman you described came back to the store about an hour after you left. He told David that he'd seen him photographing customers' lottery tickets with his phone, and that if it happened again, he'd report it to the police. So the gentleman knew what was going on. Apparently, David says the man also told him that the security camera system had been accidentally disabled for the rest of the day, and that any attempt to identify or contact recent customers would result in immediate criminal charges. I was speechless. Mrs. Morrison, this man essentially single-handedly shut down the scam operation at that location. David was so scared he quit the next day and eventually came to us with information about the whole scheme. Do you have any idea who he was? We're working on it. But Mrs. Morrison, I think you had a guardian angel that day. Someone who recognized what was happening and made sure you were protected. After hanging up, I walked around my house thinking about coincidences and interventions and the mysterious ways people sometimes look out for each other. Somewhere in Milwaukee was a person who had probably saved me from losing a significant portion of my lottery winnings, and I didn't even know his name. But I was about to discover that my guardian angel story was just the beginning of something much larger than I could have imagined. Claire's Story, Chapters 6-10. The mystery of my guardian angel took an unexpected turn the following week when I received a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in careful script across cream-colored paper. Dear Mrs. Morrison, it read, "You don't know me, but I was the gentleman behind you in line at the BP station when you purchased your lottery ticket. I hope you'll forgive an old man's curiosity, but I wanted to make sure you received your winnings safely and without interference from certain unsavory individuals." My hands were shaking as I continued reading. My name is William Harper, and I'm a retired detective with the Milwaukee Police Department. I've been investigating lottery scams as a volunteer consultant, and I happened to be conducting surveillance at that location when you made your purchase. I took the liberty of ensuring your privacy and safety during a vulnerable time. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I've seen too many good people taken advantage of during moments that should be joyful. The letter included a phone number and ended with, "If you'd ever like to meet for coffee and discuss what I observed that day, I'd be honored to explain. You handled yourself with remarkable dignity during what I imagine was a difficult period with your family. William Harper." I read the letter 3 times before calling Emma. "Mom, that's incredible," she said after I'd read it to her. "He was protecting you and you didn't even know it. I want to meet him. This man probably saved me from losing thousands of dollars, maybe more. Are you sure it's safe? How do you know this letter is really from who he says he is?" Smart girl. I'll call Linda Chen first, see if she can verify his identity. Linda confirmed that William Harper was exactly who he claimed to be, a retired detective with an excellent reputation who'd been helping with their investigation on a volunteer basis. "He's the one who first alerted us to the scam operation," she told me. "Mr. Harper has been tracking lottery fraud for years, ever since his own sister was victimized by a similar scheme. He's completely legitimate, and frankly, you owe him a debt of gratitude." I called the number from the letter that evening. "Mr. Harper, this is Claire Morrison. I received your letter." "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so glad you called. I hope I didn't overstep by writing to you." His voice was warm and gravelly, with the kind of authority that comes from years of dealing with people in crisis. "You didn't overstep at all. I'd very much like to meet you and thank you properly." We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown the following Saturday. I arrived early, nervous in a way I hadn't experienced in years. What do you say to someone who secretly protected you from criminals? I recognized him immediately when he walked in. The same neat gray hair, the same kind eyes, the same quiet authority I'd noticed in the gas station line. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and cardigan, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades observing details. "Mrs. Morrison?" He extended his hand with a slight smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you properly. Mr. Harper, please call me Claire, and thank you doesn't seem adequate for what you did. Actually, Claire, I was hoping you might be willing to help me with something." We ordered coffee, and he explained that his investigation into lottery scams had revealed something much larger than anyone had initially realized. The scheme at that gas station was part of a network operating across 3 states, he said. "These people have stolen millions from lottery winners, and they're getting more sophisticated. What saved you wasn't just my intervention, it was your own behavior." "My behavior? You paid cash. You didn't celebrate publicly. You didn't immediately claim the prize or start spending conspicuously. Most lottery winners make themselves targets within hours of winning. You disappeared completely for almost a week." I laughed. I was too shocked to do anything else. "Exactly. And that accidental wisdom probably saved you from much worse than just the initial scam. Claire, these people don't just steal money. They study winners, learn their weaknesses, and sometimes the harassment continues for years." A chill ran down my spine. "Are you saying I'm still at risk?" "Not if we're careful, but I'd like to ask you to consider something. Would you be willing to help us catch the people running this network?" I set down my coffee cup. What exactly would that involve? Nothing dangerous, he said quickly. But your story, winning the lottery, keeping it secret, handling family complications with grace, it's exactly the kind of narrative that draws these scammers out. If you are willing to share some details publicly, in a controlled way, it might help us identify other victims and catch the people responsible. You want me to make myself a target? I want you to make yourself visible in a way that would be appealing to scammers, but with full protection and surveillance. Think of it as using your story to help other people avoid what you avoided. I thought about all the lottery winners Linda had mentioned who'd lost substantial amounts to these criminals. People who'd had their dreams turned into nightmares because someone exploited their moment of joy. What would I have to do? William pulled out a folder. There's a local news program that does human interest stories. They've agreed to interview lottery winners about how sudden wealth has changed their lives. If you were willing to participate, and if you mentioned certain details, like feeling isolated, uncertain about investments, concerned about family relationships, it would likely trigger contact from the scammer network. And then we trace them, identify their methods, and hopefully shut down their operation before they victimize more people. I stared at him across the cafe table. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible, a broke widow nobody paid attention to. Now a retired detective was asking me to help catch criminals by using my own story as bait. Mr. Harper, William, why me? Surely there are other lottery winners who could help with this. There are, but most of them have already been victimized and are too traumatized to participate. And frankly, Claire, you handled an incredibly difficult family situation with remarkable strength. I watched you for weeks after that day at the gas station. You watched me? Part of the investigation. I needed to make sure the scammers hadn't found another way to target you. But what I observed was a woman who'd been dealt a terrible blow by her own family and responded not with bitterness or revenge, but with dignity and self-respect. That kind of character is rare. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I'm not sure I deserve that much credit. You kept a life-changing secret to protect people who'd been cruel to you. You gave them the opportunity to show their best selves, and when they failed, you didn't destroy them. You simply removed yourself from their toxicity. That's not common, Claire. We talked for another hour about the logistics, the safety measures, the timeline. By the time I left the cafe, I'd agreed to participate in what William called Operation Second Chance, using my story to help catch the people who preyed on lottery winners. But as I drove home, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me during our conversation. For the first time since winning the lottery, I felt like my story might be about more than just money. It might be about using an unexpected gift to help other people avoid the traps I'd accidentally avoided. The interview was scheduled for the following week. I had no idea that agreeing to help William Harper would lead me to discoveries about my own family that would change everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and the price of keeping secrets. The television interview was scheduled for a Wednesday morning at the local news station. I'd spent the previous evening with William, going over the talking points that would most likely attract the attention of the scammer network. Remember, he said, you want to sound like someone who's overwhelmed by sudden wealth and uncertain about making good decisions. Mention feeling isolated from family, worry about being taken advantage of, and especially emphasize that you're looking for trustworthy people to help you invest wisely. Won't that also attract legitimate financial advisors? Absolutely. That's why we'll have someone monitoring all the contact that comes in. Legitimate advisors will have proper credentials and established businesses. Scammers will approach you with urgent opportunities and pressure you to act quickly. The morning of the interview, I was surprisingly calm. Maybe it was because I'd spent so many months feeling powerless that the opportunity to help other people felt like a gift in itself. The interviewer, Janet Walsh, was a seasoned professional who'd clearly done her research. She knew about Emma's wedding drama, though we'd agreed not to go into specific details on air. Claire, she said during our pre-interview chat, I want you to know that your story has already resonated with our staff. The idea that good fortune can sometimes reveal the worst in people, that's something our viewers will connect with. The interview itself went smoothly. I talked about the shock of winning, the difficulty of keeping such a big secret, and the challenges of navigating relationships when money changes the dynamic. I was honest about feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about investment options. "What's the hardest part about winning the lottery?" Janet asked. "The loneliness," I answered, and it wasn't acting. When you can't trust people's motivations anymore, when you're not sure if they care about you or your bank account, you start to feel very alone in the world. And what are you looking for now? Trustworthy guidance. People who can help me make wise decisions with this gift I've been given. I never expected to have this kind of responsibility, and I want to handle it in a way that honors the opportunity. Perfect, according to William's standards for scammer bait. The interview aired that Friday evening. By Monday morning, I'd received 17 phone calls, 12 emails, and 3 people had shown up at my door. William and his team were monitoring everything. Most of the contact was legitimate: financial advisors, charitable organizations, a few people sharing their own lottery stories. But 3 contacts immediately raised red flags. The first was a call from someone claiming to represent an exclusive investment opportunity for recent lottery winners. The second was an email about a time-sensitive real estate investment that requires immediate action. The third was a knock on my door from a well-dressed woman who said she represented a private foundation that helps lottery winners protect their wealth from family members who might take advantage. That last one was particularly insidious because it played directly on the family drama that had been mentioned in the interview. "Mrs. Morrison," the woman said when I answered the door, "my name is Sandra Powell, and I work with the Financial Protection Institute. We specialize in helping lottery winners who've experienced family conflicts over money." She was smooth, professional, and had clearly researched my story thoroughly. William had coached me on how to respond to approaches like this: show interest but not commitment, ask for references, and insist on taking time to think about any proposals. "That's very interesting," I said. "Can you tell me more about your organization?" "Of course. We're a private foundation that helps people in your situation protect their assets from family members who might use emotional manipulation to access your wealth. We've seen cases where lottery winners lost millions to relatives who claimed to need emergency loans or investment partnerships. It was a clever angle, positioning themselves as protectors against family exploitation while essentially planning to exploit me themselves. How would this protection work?" I asked. "We set up secure trust funds and investment accounts that can't be accessed by family members, even in emergency situations. There's an initial setup fee of $50,000, but it protects much larger amounts from being lost to emotional manipulation." I managed to keep my expression neutral while thinking about how many people had probably fallen for this approach. Family conflicts over lottery winnings were common enough that this protection angle would seem reasonable to someone who was already dealing with relationship problems. "That sounds very wise," I said. "Could I have some references from other clients?" Sandra's smile became slightly forced. "I'm afraid client confidentiality prevents us from sharing specific references, but I can show you some testimonials from people we've helped." She handed me a folder full of what looked like satisfied customer letters. William had warned me that these would be fake, created specifically to lend credibility to the scam. "This is very impressive," I said, "but this is such an important decision. I'd need some time to consider it carefully." "Of course. But Mrs. Morrison, I do need to mention that we only accept a limited number of clients each year, and there are several other lottery winners in your area who've expressed interest in our services. I'd hate for you to lose this opportunity because of delays." The pressure tactic. Another classic scammer move. "I understand. How quickly would I need to decide?" "If you're seriously interested, I'd need a commitment and the initial payment within 48 hours to reserve your spot." I promised to consider it carefully and took her business card. After she left, I immediately called William. "Perfect," he said when I described the interaction. "Sandra Powell, if that's her real name, just hit every red flag on our list. No real references, pressure to act quickly, upfront payment required, and the protection angle designed specifically for your situation. What happens now? Now we trace her. Oh. The business card she gave you, the phone number, any digital footprints. This is exactly the kind of lead we need to identify the broader network." But while we were focused on Sandra Powell and her Financial Protection Institute, something else was happening that would prove far more significant to my personal story. Emma called that evening, and she sounded strange, excited, but also nervous. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I saw your interview on Friday. What did you think?" "I thought you were brave and honest. But Mom, After it aired, I got a call from someone I never expected to hear from again. My stomach dropped. Marcus? No, Dad's brother, Uncle Jimmy. I hadn't heard that name in years. Robert's younger brother had disappeared from our lives shortly after Robert's death, after some kind of family conflict I'd never fully understood. What did he want? He wants to see you. Mom, he said watching that interview made him realize he'd made a terrible mistake years ago, and that he has something important to tell you about Dad. About your father? Emma, your father died 8 years ago. What could Jimmy possibly have to say about him now? I don't know, but he sounded urgent, like it was something he should have told you a long time ago. After we hung up, I sat in my living room trying to remember the last time I'd seen Jimmy Morrison. It had been at Robert's funeral, and he'd seemed agitated about something, but I'd assumed it was grief. He'd approached me during the reception and started to say something about Robert's finances, but I'd been too overwhelmed to focus on details. What could Robert's brother possibly need to tell me now? 8 years later, that was so urgent it couldn't wait until a more appropriate time? I was about to discover that some secrets don't stay buried forever, and that my lottery win had set in motion revelations about my late husband that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and the real reason Jimmy Morrison had disappeared from our lives. Jimmy Morrison was supposed to meet me at the same cafe where I'd first talked with William Harper, but he called that morning to change the location. Claire, I'm sorry, but could we meet somewhere more private? What I need to tell you. It's complicated, and I don't want to risk being overheard. Something in his voice made my chest tight. Of course. Would you like to come to my house? Actually, would you mind meeting me at Riverside Park? There's a bench by the duck pond where we can talk without interruption. Riverside Park had been Robert's favorite place. He'd taken Emma there every weekend when she was little, and we'd had family picnics there every summer. If Jimmy wanted to talk about Robert, it was somehow fitting that we'd meet there. I arrived first and sat on the bench overlooking the pond where Robert used to bring stale bread for Emma to throw to the ducks. It was a crisp October afternoon, and the maple trees were showing off their autumn colors. Jimmy looked older than I'd expected when he walked up. Robert had been 49 when he died, and Jimmy was 3 years younger, but the man approaching me looked like he'd aged more than 8 years should account for. His hair was completely gray, and he moved with the careful gait of someone carrying a heavy burden. Claire, he sat down beside me, but didn't make eye contact immediately. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Of course. Jimmy, what's this about? You said it was about Robert? He was quiet for so long I wondered if he'd changed his mind about talking. Finally, he spoke. Claire, I need to ask you something first. After Robert died, did you ever wonder about the life insurance situation? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, Robert was always meticulous about financial planning. He had spreadsheets for everything, backup plans for backup plans. But when he died, there was no life insurance policy. Did that ever strike you as odd? I remembered the awful weeks after Robert's death, trying to navigate funeral arrangements and financial obligations while grieving. The lawyer said Robert had let his policy lapse, that he'd stopped paying premiums because money was tight. Robert never let anything lapse, especially something that important. Claire, there was a life insurance policy, a substantial one. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? Jimmy finally looked at me. $250,000. Enough to have covered all the medical bills and set you and Emma up comfortably. That's impossible. I would have known. The insurance company would have contacted me. They tried to. The problem was, Robert had changed the beneficiary. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Changed it to who? To me. I stared at him, not comprehending. To you? Why would Robert leave his life insurance to you instead of his wife and daughter? Jimmy's face crumpled. Because I convinced him to. Claire, I was gambling. Badly. I owed money to people who don't accept payment plans, and I was desperate. I told Robert that if I didn't pay them back quickly, they'd come after the family business, maybe even hurt Emma. The family business? Robert had worked for a large accounting firm. Not a family business. Our father's construction company. Robert and I inherited it together when Dad died, but Robert had moved on to accounting and let me run the day-to-day operations. What he didn't know was that I'd been using company funds to cover gambling debts, and when that wasn't enough anymore, I borrowed money from loan sharks using the business as collateral. I felt like I was hearing a story about strangers. Robert never told me any of this, because I begged him not to. I was ashamed, and I promised I could fix it if he just helped me one time. The plan was for me to take the insurance money, pay off the debts, and then immediately take out a new policy with you as the beneficiary again. But that's not what happened. Jimmy shook his head. Robert died 6 weeks after he changed the beneficiary. I got the insurance money, paid off the loan sharks, and saved the business. But Claire, you and Emma lost everything because of my selfishness. I sat there watching ducks paddle around the pond while my understanding of my entire widowhood reconstructed itself. The years of financial struggle, the part-time jobs, the constant worry about money, all of it unnecessary. Why are you telling me this now? I asked finally. Because I saw that interview. I heard you talking about feeling isolated and not knowing who to trust, and I realized that I'm part of the reason you've had to be so careful about people's motivations. You've spent 8 years struggling financially because I was too much of a coward to make things right. What do you mean? Make things right? Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. The construction business has done well over the years. Very well. I've saved money specifically for this conversation, money that should have been yours all along. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Claire, I can't give you back the 8 years you spent worrying about money. I can't undo the stress you went through or the opportunities you missed, but I can give you what Robert intended you to have. I opened the envelope. It was a cashier's check for $450,000. That's the insurance money plus 8 years of compound interest. Calculated conservatively, Jimmy said. It's what you would have had if I hadn't been selfish and scared. I stared at the check, thinking about all the nights I'd laid awake worrying about expenses, all the times I'd denied myself small luxuries, all the stress Emma had absorbed watching me struggle. Jimmy, I already won the lottery. I don't need this money anymore. But you needed it for 8 years when you didn't have it. Claire, this isn't about need anymore. This is about making amends for a wrong I've been too cowardly to address. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I spoke. Does Emma know about any of this? Not unless you tell her. But Claire, there's something else you should know. When Robert found out he was sick, really sick, he was planning to change the beneficiary back to you. He'd made the appointment with the insurance company for the following week. He knew he was dying. The doctors had told him the cancer was aggressive and that he probably had less than 2 months. He was trying to put everything in order, make sure you and Emma would be taken care of. He died thinking you'd be financially secure because he didn't know I hadn't already switched the beneficiary back. The cruelest irony of all, Robert had died believing his family was protected, never knowing they'd spend the next 8 years struggling because of a promise his brother had failed to keep. Jimmy, why didn't you just give me the money right after Robert died? Because I was a coward, and because once I let you struggle for the first few months, it became harder and harder to admit what I'd done. Every year that passed made the truth more devastating to reveal. I looked at my former brother-in-law, this man who'd been carrying 8 years of guilt and shame, and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry. I was sad for all of us. For Robert, who'd died thinking he'd protected his family. For me, who'd spent years believing my husband had been careless about our security. For Emma, who'd grown up watching her mother struggle unnecessarily. And for Jimmy, who'd been living with this secret for almost a decade. What happens to the construction business? I asked. It's yours if you want it, or I can sell it and give you that money too. Claire, I've spent 8 years trying to figure out how to make this right. And the truth is, there's no amount of money that undoes the years you lost. I folded the check and put it back in the envelope. Jimmy, I need some time to think about this. About all of it. Of course, but Claire, please know that seeing you handle yourself with such grace in that interview, it made me realize that you deserved so much better than what happened. Robert would be proud of the woman you've become, even though you had to become her the hard way. As I drove home from the park, I realized that my lottery win had become the catalyst for revelations I never could have anticipated. First, the scammer investigation with William, now Jimmy's confession about the insurance money. But the biggest revelation was still coming, and it would involve Emma discovering something about Marcus that would change both of our lives forever. Emma called me at 6 a.m. 3 days after my conversation with Jimmy. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Mom, I need to see you right away. Something's happened. Something terrible. Are you hurt? Do you need me to call someone? No, I'm fine physically. But Mom, I found out something about Marcus that I can't talk about this over the phone. Can I come over? 20 minutes later, Emma was sitting at my kitchen table, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were shaking as she accepted the coffee I'd made. Emma, what's going on? Do you remember Marcus's ex-fiancée? The one he said couldn't handle the commitment? Vaguely. Her name is Rachel. And Mom? She didn't leave him because she couldn't handle commitment. She left him because she found out he was stealing from her. I sat down across from Emma. Stealing what? Money. From her savings account. She'd given him access to help her manage some investments, and over 6 months, he transferred almost $40,000 to his own accounts. How did you find this out? Rachel contacted me. She saw the interview you did on TV, and when they mentioned the family conflict over your lottery win, she recognized the pattern. She's been trying to warn Marcus's other ex-girlfriends for years. Emma pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. Rachel says Marcus has done this to at least 3 women. He targets women who have money but don't feel confident managing it themselves. He presents himself as financially sophisticated, offers to help with investments, then gradually steals whatever he can access. My stomach dropped. Emma, did you give him access to any of your accounts? That's the worst part. Yes. Right after we got engaged, he convinced me to consolidate my savings into a joint investment account that he would manage. He said it would be good practice for when we were married and sharing finances. How much? $18,000. Everything I'd saved working part-time through college, plus some money Grandma left me. Is it still there? Emma's face crumpled. I checked yesterday. The account was closed 2 weeks ago. All the money was transferred to an account I don't have access to. I felt a rage building that was different from anything I'd experienced during my own conflict with Marcus. When he'd attacked me, it had been personal but abstract. This was theft, plain and simple, from my daughter. Have you contacted the police? I wanted to talk to you first. Mom, there's more. Rachel says that after Marcus steals the money, he usually disappears for a few months, then resurfaces with a story about investment losses or market downturns. He offers to pay the money back slowly, and most women are so embarrassed they don't pursue legal action. But $18,000? That's a felony. I know, but I'm scared, Mom. What if I can't prove he stole it? What if it looks like I willingly gave him access, and now I'm just a bitter ex-girlfriend trying to cause trouble? I thought about this carefully. Emma was right, that proving theft might be complicated if she'd voluntarily given Marcus access to the account. But there might be another way to handle this. Emma, I want you to call Rachel and get contact information for his other victims. And then I want you to call William Harper, the retired detective who helped you. Exactly. If Marcus is running a pattern of financial fraud against multiple women, that's not a he-said-she-said situation anymore. That's a criminal enterprise. Emma looked hopeful for the first time since she'd arrived. You really think William can help? I think William specializes in exactly this kind of financial crime. And I think Marcus made a crucial mistake when he decided to target the daughter of a lottery winner who's already cooperating with a financial fraud investigation. I called William that afternoon and explained the situation. His response was immediate and decisive. Claire, this fits perfectly with what we're already investigating. The lottery scammer network often works with romantic fraudsters who target family members of recent winners. If Marcus was involved with the people who tried to scam you, taking money from Emma might have been part of a larger plan. You think he was specifically targeting Emma because of my lottery win? It's possible. Think about the timeline. When did Marcus become more serious about marriage? I thought back to Emma's relationship timeline. Right around the time I won, actually. Emma said he started pushing for an earlier wedding date and talking about their financial future together. Claire, I need to ask you something that might be uncomfortable. Is there any chance Marcus knew about your lottery win before Emma did? The question hit me like ice water. That's impossible. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. But Marcus works in accounting, right? He has access to financial databases, credit reporting systems. If he was part of a network that specifically targets lottery winners, he might have ways of identifying recent winners before they publicly claim their prizes. I thought about all the subtle changes I'd noticed in Marcus's behavior toward Emma after I'd won the lottery. The increased interest in our family finances, the pushing for an earlier wedding, the sudden concern about my involvement in their ceremony. William, are you suggesting that Marcus targeted Emma specifically because he knew about the lottery win? I'm suggesting it's worth investigating. Claire, would you and Emma be willing to meet with me tomorrow? I'd like to hear more details about Marcus's behavior and his timeline with Emma. Of course, but as I hung up, I realized something that made me feel sick. If Marcus had been targeting Emma because of my lottery win, then the humiliation at the wedding wasn't just cruel personal behavior. It was part of a calculated plan to isolate me from my family while he positioned himself to access lottery winnings through marriage to my daughter, which meant that my decision to keep the lottery win secret hadn't protected Emma from gold diggers. It had made her a target for something much worse. The next day's meeting with William would reveal the full scope of what we were dealing with, and it would lead to a confrontation with Marcus that would test everything I'd learned about standing up for myself and protecting the people I loved. William's office was in a nondescript building downtown, but inside, it looked like the command center for a major investigation. Charts, timelines, and photographs covered the walls, connected by red string that mapped out financial fraud networks across 3 states. Emma, William said after introductions, I want you to look at this timeline and tell me if any of these dates correspond to changes in Marcus's behavior. The timeline showed lottery winners in Wisconsin over the past 2 years, with dates marking when prizes were claimed, when winners were publicly announced, and when victims were subsequently targeted by scammers. Emma studied the chart carefully. William, this date here, March 15th, that's exactly when Marcus first brought up the idea of us getting married sooner rather than later. March 15th was 1 day after I'd claimed my lottery prize. And this date? William pointed to another marker. April 3rd. That's when Marcus suggested I should consolidate my savings into the joint investment account. She looked at me with growing horror. Mom, that's the same week you told me about the lottery win. William nodded grimly. Emma, I need to show you something else. He pulled out a folder containing bank records and financial documents. These are Marcus Patterson's financial records for the past year. Look at the deposit patterns. The records showed regular deposits that corresponded exactly with the dates that lottery winners in our area had been contacted by scammers. Marcus wasn't just stealing from you and his other girlfriends, William explained. He was getting paid by the scammer network for identifying and targeting family members of lottery winners. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. You're saying he was never really interested in Emma at all? I'm saying his interest in Emma increased dramatically after your lottery win, and his financial records suggest he was being compensated for information about your family. Emma was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. So everything, our entire relationship, was likely a job assignment, William said gently. Emma, I'm sorry. I know this is devastating to hear, but Emma surprised both of us. Instead of breaking down, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly at William. What do we do to stop him? We're going to set a trap. Emma, if you're willing, we're going to let Marcus think he still has a chance to get to your mother's money. We'll arrange a meeting where he thinks he can manipulate both of you, but where we'll actually be recording everything he says. Is that legal? Wisconsin is a one-party consent state for recording. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's admissible evidence. And Emma, based on what we've uncovered, Marcus is part of a criminal conspiracy that's stolen millions from dozens of families. Your courage in helping us catch him could prevent other people from being victimized. Emma looked at me. Mom, what do you think? I thought about all the lottery winners who'd lost money because they trusted the wrong people. I thought about the families torn apart by financial scams. I thought about the $18,000 stolen from my daughter, and the months of manipulation she'd endured thinking she was in love. I think Marcus Patterson needs to learn that he picked the wrong family to mess with. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Emma would contact Marcus and tell him she'd been thinking about their relationship, that she missed him, and wanted to discuss the possibility of reconciliation. She'd mentioned that I was considering making a large financial gift to help them get started in life together, but that I was concerned about making good investment decisions. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at a restaurant with private dining rooms that William's team could monitor. Marcus arrived exactly on time, dressed in his most expensive suit and carrying flowers for Emma. I watched him through the surveillance equipment in the adjacent room, marveling at how perfectly he played the role of the repentant boyfriend. "Emma, I can't tell you how much I've missed you," he said, taking her hands across the table. "I know I made mistakes, but seeing your mother on television made me realize how much family means to you, and I want to be part of that. Marcus, I've missed you too, but I need to know that you're really committed to this relationship, not just interested because my family situation has changed." "What do you mean?" "I mean my mother's lottery win. I need to know that you want me for me, not because my family suddenly has money." Marcus's expression became earnest and slightly hurt. "Emma, how can you think that? I fell in love with you long before I knew about your mother's financial situation." "But you did know about it, didn't you? Before I told you?" This was the crucial moment. Marcus could have admitted that he'd found out through his own research, or he could lie and claim he'd learned about it from Emma. "Of course not. How would I have known something like that?" "Because you work in accounting, Marcus. You have access to financial databases, and your behavior changed dramatically right after Mom claimed her prize, even though I didn't tell you about it until weeks later." Marcus's face went through several emotions quickly: surprise, calculation, and then defensive anger. "Emma, I don't know what you're implying, but I resent the suggestion that I was somehow investigating your family. That's paranoid and insulting." "Is it paranoid?" "Because I've been talking to Rachel, and to Jennifer, and to Sarah, all your ex-girlfriends, Marcus, the ones whose money you stole." Now Marcus's mask came off completely. "Those women are bitter liars. Whatever they told you. They told me that you have a pattern. Target women with money, gain access to their accounts, steal whatever you can, then disappear when they figure it out. That's ridiculous. I helped those women with investments that didn't work out. That's completely different from theft." "Then explain this," Emma said, sliding a bank statement across the table. "This is my savings account, the one you convinced me to consolidate into our joint investment account. Where's my $18,000, Marcus?" Marcus glanced at the statement, and I could see him calculating his options. Finally, he seemed to decide that offense was his best defense. "Emma, your $18,000 is invested in a portfolio that's temporarily showing losses due to market volatility. I can show you the statements. I'd like to see those statements. They're at my apartment. But Emma, if you don't trust me enough to weather a temporary downturn, maybe we're not as compatible as I thought." The gaslighting was masterful, turning Emma's legitimate concern about stolen money into a test of her commitment to their relationship. But Emma had learned a lot about manipulation over the past few months. "Marcus, I want my money back, all of it, by Monday." "That's impossible. It's invested in instruments that can't be liquidated quickly without substantial penalties." "Then you should have thought about that before you stole it." "I didn't steal anything." Marcus's voice rose for the first time. "I made investment decisions as the account manager you authorized. If you can't handle the responsibilities that come with having a financially sophisticated partner, then maybe you're better off with someone more at your level." And there it was, the core of how Marcus operated. When caught, he didn't apologize or explain. He attacked his victim's competence and self-worth. "My level?" Emma's voice was dangerously quiet. "Emma, let's be honest. You're a sweet girl, but you're not equipped to handle complex financial situations. That's why you needed me to manage your investments in the first place. Your family doesn't understand money. Look at how your mother was living before she got lucky with a lottery ticket." "Lucky? Come on." "Emma, your mother was basically a charity case before she won. She couldn't even afford decent clothes for your wedding. The only reason anyone cares what she thinks about finances now is because she stumbled into money she doesn't know how to handle." In the surveillance room, William put a hand on my shoulder. "That's enough," he said quietly. "We have everything we need." But Emma wasn't finished. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. This entire conversation has been recorded. The police are in the next room, and you just confessed to financial fraud while insulting the family of a woman who's been cooperating with a criminal investigation." Marcus's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you're part of a criminal network that targets lottery winners. I'm talking about the fact that your bank records show you've been getting paid to provide information about victims' families. I'm talking about the fact that you're going to be arrested for multiple felonies." The door opened, and William entered with 2 uniformed police officers. "Marcus Patterson, You're under arrest for financial fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and violation of computer fraud statutes." As they read Marcus his rights and led him away, he looked back at Emma with an expression of pure hatred. "You'll never find anyone else who can offer you what I did," he called out. Emma's response was perfect. "You're absolutely right. I'll never find another criminal who targeted me as part of a scam. Thank goodness." 6 months later, Marcus was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all his victims. The scammer network he'd been working with was dismantled, and 17 other criminals were arrested across 3 states. Emma got her $18,000 back, plus interest. More importantly, she'd learned the difference between love and manipulation, between someone who values you for yourself and someone who sees you as a means to an end. As for me, I used part of my lottery winnings to establish a foundation that provides free financial counseling to recent lottery winners. William Harper became the director, and we've helped dozens of people avoid the scams that almost victimized me. I kept Jimmy's check, but I donated it to a scholarship fund for students whose families have been affected by gambling addiction. It felt like the right way to honor Robert's memory while helping people break cycles that destroy families. The best part of the whole experience? Emma and I are closer now than we've ever been. She moved into an apartment 5 minutes from my house, and we have dinner together twice a week. She's dating a teacher named David who's never asked about my lottery win and who brings me flowers on Mother's Day because he wants to, not because he thinks it will gain him access to anything. And every Tuesday, I still buy a lottery ticket at that same BP station. Not because I need the money, but because I like the reminder that sometimes life surprises you with exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, even if you have to go through some very unpleasant people to get there. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be, and using that transformation to help other people avoid the traps you escaped. That's a lottery win money can't buy.